Hello, my name is Sridhar Rangan. I'm the Festival Director of KASHISH Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, which is having a second weekend right now. And this is the acceptance weekend. You must have already seen so many LGBTQ films over the Discovery weekend. And of course, we have acceptance weekend and Pride weekend. But film screenings is not just the only thing which KASHISH does. It also enables discussions. And today we have a wonderful panel discussions where we're all coming together right now. So KASHISH 2021 in collaboration with AtEase, a countrywide inclusive mental health platform, will moderate a panel discussion on mental health of LGBTQIA plus individuals in India. The panel discussion will shed light on lived experiences of being queer and non-binary and mental health issues attached with gender and sexuality. So join us to understand how mental health of queer folks has been affected, especially during the pandemic, and how we can create safe spaces. So it's a very, very important panel discussion, and we are addressing so many issues. And to do the moderation, basically somebody who's going to host the Q&A is RICHA VASHISTA. Her leads AtEase, an inclusive mental health platform with a special focus on cis women, trans women, and non-binary individuals. She has a postgraduate degree in clinical psychology, SNDT University, and has been working as a mental health professional for the last 7 years. She speaks at various national and international forums, emphasizing on the importance of mental health and rights of LGBTQIA plus individuals. And I have known Richa for so many years. She's a fantastic person. She's also a fantastic mental health professional. So thank you, Richa, for hosting this particular thing, and over to you.
Thank you, Sridhar. That was such an exciting and warm introduction to the panel. And I think it's so important that we talk about mental health even in any space, in any sphere. And I think that's what our conversation today is going to be about. So I'm going to be introducing our panelists for today. It's going to be an amazing discussion, so please stay till the end. So our first panelist for the day is Kriti. Their pronouns are she and her. She's a banker by profession. She is a vocal advocate for mental health, intersectional feminism, and LGBTQIA inclusion. She's an avid reader, writer, and an amateur astronomer. She loves memes and deep conversations. Our second panelist for the day is Nandita. Their pronouns are they and she. They identify as a demisexual, demi-romantic, poly-lesbian. They're a mental health professional at the Alternative Story. They hold a bachelor's degree in philosophy from Miranda House, Delhi University, and a master's of science in counseling psychology from Montfort Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. They feel a strong pull towards matters related to intersectionality, existentialism, trauma, grief, sexual health, caregiving, and the LGBTQIA plus community. And our third panelist for the day, their name is Trupti. Their pronouns are they and them. They identify as a non-binary person. They are a social worker by profession and are passionate about mental health rights, especially of the queer community. They have a cat and feel that their cat is an extension of their personality. So thank you for being a part of this amazing, interesting conversation about mental health, queer identities. And today what we're going to focus on is to talk about, what binaries are, to talk about the stigma that's there in the country, and to look at a future that are beyond binaries, that are beyond stigma, so that we as LGBTQIA plus individuals in the country can live a respectful life, live a life that is as much as equals to any other identity that we're looking at in the country. So yes, thank you once again to be a part of this discussion. So the first thing that I feel like I'd like to get into and kind of understand from the three of you is your lived experiences as a queer person, as a non-binary person in India, with all the heteronormity we see, with patriarchy, with sexism, there are so many things from a social justice lens if we have to kind of look at it. So what have been your lived experiences as a queer person or as a non-binary person in the country?
I think I'll go first. I don't know where to start, honestly, because it's been coming out of the closet, then going back in, then I don't know how many closets I have exited and entered by now. I have lost a count. And so for me, it all started from the default sexual orientation where I was completely cishet. And then one night randomly I discovered that no, there's more to this conversation, and that I am attracted to, cis women, that I am bisexual. That said, that was really downplayed in a lot of aspects back then, so that males would see it as a challenge, that they would want me to get onto their side of the spectrum. That, how do we convince her that, we are the stronger side of the spectrum, and that every fun, every good thing lies on this end and not the other end. Or they would make it a situation where let's have a threesome out of this. With women, I was really scared and intimidated at the time, because I didn't have a lot of exposure to queer, like fellow queer women. So that was a very big struggle, which made me realize that it's better just for the sake of it to stay on the male side of it, because no matter how trashy most of them are, there's a higher access to it. Uh, so then eventually then I realized through working in therapy that I have a very, very inherent sense of fear and not feeling safe around cishet males. That comes from my own personal history, and no matter how much I've worked it in therapy, it continued to stay. So this meant then letting go of the other side of the spectrum and coming to terms with the fact that I am gay. And now, honestly, at 25, to say that, I've realized for the first time that I am a lesbian, it means that my dating pool becomes smaller. Like, it becomes smaller and smaller, because I don't know how many lesbians are out there, and I don't know how many lesbians are able to live a life where they're vocal about their identity, and I don't know how many of them would want to settle down with a fellow queer person. So the dating pool gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So that was one big struggle. That said, it was a relief to know that there was a sense of that I could finally live my truth in a way, that I wasn't always trying to fix my fear around guys. So far, I've joined Hinge to meet people, and one of the biggest bummers on Hinge is that after a point of time, they will start throwing cishet guys and girls your way. So is it like, are you secretly trying to convert me, or just tell me that you don't have any more options? You don't have to, like, it's actually uncomfortable. It's triggering in a sense, because this app, which pretends to be so socio-politically informed, like given their pronouns and the kind of gender identities that they're letting you put in your profile, saying that I'm interested only in women and then showing me men, I don't know how. I don't feel respected in that sense. Also, I'm coming at an age where I'm supposed to marry, and I'm realizing how different queer timelines are, because cishet timelines are what we're taught from the beginning, that you are born, that you do your study, then you marry, kids, die, done. But queer timelines, I am coming out probably for the second time at 25. I am a gay baby right now at 25. So I am now probably living my teenage life. I'm going out on dates with women. I'm just having a lot of fun, just, going out and see what's there out for me. So to do that at 25, while also struggling with the heteronormative society that expects me to marry by 25, it's a lot of pain in the ass, to be very honest. So I mean, yeah, I think that's a good enough start for me and where my queerness is stemming from. Yeah.
Right. So thanks a lot, Nandita, for sharing that. I personally related to a lot of what you shared, and I'm sure the viewers, who identify as queer, non-binary, or just a part of the LGBTQIA spectrum, would also kind of relate to a lot of what you said, kind of growing up in the Indian society, especially the part when you come out yourself and you're like, okay, now I have to go through this all over again. So, my younger days are actually happening right now, whereas the society actually expects me to get married. So yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that. Kriti, what were your experiences as a queer person in the country?
Yeah, so when Nandita was speaking, I related so much to them, especially about the dating app thing. So like my biggest irritation with dating apps is, apart from what Nandita said, is like I swipe left 50 cishet men and 5 good queer women also get swipe left there. So yeah, so I came out amidst intense pressure of meeting guys for arranged marriage about a couple of years ago. and I'm 30 now. So I'm just beginning in the queer scene, because it takes a while to, even after you come out, you have to come out so many times. So it takes a while to get comfortable in your skin, even when you have accepted yourself and come to terms with it. And then you are beginning to realize how to navigate the world around you that is so not ready. And while I come from a place and position of privilege in terms of caste and economic class, and having a secure financial job and having educated parents, so those privileges, I thought, usually you think that they make things easy. But what happens is people start telling me, what is wrong with you? Because you've got everything with you, you've got everything on your plate. Why are you bringing this into your life and making things unnecessarily difficult? So because you're supposed to, like, you have everything laid out for you in such a seamless timeline for you, that you'll have so many perfectly lined up guys and arranged marriage options and this and that. And it felt like I was self-sabotaging myself according to other people's views. So it's still an ongoing journey with respect to that. But I think, while personally it has been a very alienating experience in terms of working in a public sector and coming from a place which is essentially very patriarchal and conservative. I'm from Rajasthan. But I think politically and socially, it has been a very, I have grown so much since coming out, because while it began with the realization that the way I love and the way I'm attracted to people is different. But then I realized that there are so many layers to being queer. You shed one mask and then you become aware of 150 other masks that you've been wearing, and you're simply not aware of them. So you start shedding each one of them, and when you shed each layer, you just keep becoming braver and braver, and also more vulnerable. And that is such a beautiful thing. You start challenging so many status quo, you start questioning your biases, you start realizing your privileges. And I think, even though on the outside it feels like you're self-sabotaging your life according to other people, you're not enjoying your privileges and you're not valuing what you have. But I think if you just look beneath that, I think I'm so blessed to be queer, to be able to realize all that, and to be able to unlearn so much. So I think that has been the biggest part of it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability right now while you were speaking about this. And I think some of your words and the metaphor you used was so powerful. Thanks a lot once again. Trupti, what have your experiences been like?
I guess it has been a very big roller coaster. I've not particularly enjoyed it as much as I admit I should have, in a way, but I figured out I was different maybe when I was in the 10th standard. I had a mini crush on one of my classmates in 8th standard, and I found it on Reddit, somewhere like one of those forums, that there is a word called bisexual. And I was like, oh, okay, that is something that is very interesting. And then a very close friend of mine kind of helped me processing, understanding, figuring it out. And I guess the worst part about discovering yourself that you're queer or you're from the community in India is that you want to share it with other people, but you don't realize that there are no people you can share it with. And even if you want to share it with people that you find are trustworthy, you are going to outrightly face some sort of discrimination. So even if you find that your friends are kind of woke or whatever that might be, or might be very, you have known your best friends since around 17 years now, you can just come up and you can just tell them, oh, this is the case. But then you might get a statement like, oh, I'm okay with this, but I don't necessarily advocate that. And then there is so much of that part where you go back into the closet, where you come out of the closet. And also, I guess a part of me which has trigger warning exclusively faced a lot of violence in terms of my family while coming out. I was not even out, actually. I was outed by one of my close family members. And then this whole journey of trying to make peace with my family, and then understanding that this is a completely alien concept to them, but also at the same time thinking that maybe my identity, or rather my kind of journey, is more important than constantly keeping up, because of how patriarchal Indian families are and how heteronormative they can be, and especially in terms of how rigid their norms are. If um making a choice over being myself, and between my family, I think I've always now chosen my own self, because I feel it is essential. We are guilt tripped for having this identity. We are guilt tripped for, and like Katie very rightly said, I mean, you have a caste privilege, you have a class privilege, and that privilege obviously is going to help you in moving out and like being employed, moving around in those social circles, which other people from maybe DBA community or from very marginalized community will obviously not have. But then when you have this kind of privilege, I kind of managed to push myself out for masters and everything. And then when there this sort of guilt tripping does happen from your family, where and especially I have faced a lot of biphobia within the family, from the community, that, oh, you have a choice. And since I also have a cishet partner right now, there is always a lot of, oh, that side of you is gone, right? And that kind of existence in itself is a very big thing that kind of defines. And obviously being queer in India is just, at first it looks like parties, at first it looks like hookups, at first it looks just like just being around, cruising around, although non-men don't have that luxury. But I feel like all of it is like very glossed over. But in a real sense, being queer in India, especially coming from a non-binary position or from women, cis women, or any trans women, I feel it is so painful in itself. It's a very painful journey, although it does have its own, it does have a sense of solidarity, I would say, in a way. But then that solidarity is also so limited that it might, not be that comfortable. But I think that as we go forward and as we have more dialogue, I feel a lot more people who are coming from behind, a lot more of the younger generation today is quite finding it easy to come out, in a sense. And also, of course, access to internet and technology, big privilege again. Those who have are able to do that. And also the choice of moving out, I guess, is what I guess would define a career, like my journey as a queer person in India, most probably.
Right, right. Thanks a lot, Trupti, for sharing that. I think, again, a lot of it were very relatable, and you made some really, really important points. And I think I forgot to mention this at the start of the conversation, and I realized that just to kind of put out a trigger warning, so that if there is any conversation that is triggering for the viewer, you can always, take some space from this conversation and, maybe come back later. Since we're talking about mental health, since we're talking about being queer in India, a lot of these conversations can be very triggering. Yes. So moving on, I think since this is the pandemic, COVID-19 is ongoing. It somehow doesn't want to come to an end, and it has been rather very difficult for queer individuals to look at home as a safe space, or just to look at safe spaces, or how the pandemic has kind of affected lives of queer individuals. If the three of you, maybe through your professional experience as well as your whatever you're comfortable with, or your personal experience, if you could talk about your experience during the pandemic, how has mental health been for you? Or maybe Nandita, if you could talk about a little bit about your work during the pandemic. Trupti, I mean, if there is anything that you would like to add as well. So just, keeping this discussion a little open based on what your experience has been like.
So professionally, I would not like to quote instances of client because that breaches confidentiality. That said, I can still talk about my experience primarily. So let's do the professional bit first. I was at my organization co-facilitating Queer Over Here. It is basically a support group that the Alternative Story runs for queer and trans folks. And that proved out to be a very, very big sense of solidarity for me. And it came at a very, very good time when I was coming to terms with my own, lesbian identity. And the thing was, one would think that, the therapist or the facilitator doesn't have much to get because they already know stuff and that's why they are in the facilitating position. That said, what ends up happening a lot of time is that our queerness feels affirmed. It feels real because we realized that we had a lot of common themes no matter what position we were coming from. So be it like, am I queer enough? Am I dressing queer enough? Am I acting queer enough? Is my queerness just a performance with a cishet audience? There were so many themes that came out that I think the whole community to me for a lot of these hours felt a little more human because there's this idea that there's a community out there. That said, the community is never at my doorstep, always accessible, right? And especially during the pandemic. So it was through groups like these that I felt like a very strong sense of solidarity. And that I think was a really, really big thing for me during the pandemic. Because I think if I were to summarize that sort of space, it would be like, even like we all were sailing in a shitstorm, even though like the boats looked different. That said, at the end of the day, just knowing that we're all we're all like just managing or sinking together really helped. I think that's all that counts for in a situation like that. That even we're all fucked in this together because humans love a sense of collectiveness, especially in the Indian sense that we've grown up. Personally, I mean, I've come to realize that, especially like the marriageable aspect that I was talking about, that when it comes to cishet people, there's a lot of community participation. Like my neighborhood aunties will be like showing me guys, my relatives will be calling me up and sending me rishtas. There are all these matrimony sites. My local panditji will also be some guy I've never known all my life, will be so interested in who I get to sleep with, on my suhagrat and all that stuff. There's a lot of community support that not prolongs, that furthers the cishet normative. That said, now if I'm gay and I want to settle down with the person at this age, there's not much support. Sabko chodo, it will be my mother first who will come after my life. And I'm actually facing a lot of homophobia from her because things like now she's a single parent, okay? So things like did I have to invest all that money in your future just because you wanted to settle down with a girl now? Is that what it all comes down to? Or if that's the choice you're going to take, maybe don't settle down at all, live with me, okay? So I mean, I have a beautiful dream that I want to have a 2 BHK and I want to live with my primary partner at that point of time and have our pets, have a lot of greenery in the house, like a very fulfilling, meaningful space, a safe space. That's it. Then it comes that, how will my mother fit in the picture? She's a single parent, and most children of single parent are expected to look after their parents because there's no other second parent in the picture. So I think a lot of that has been going on for me. So I think in the pandemic, the homophobia in my own house became really close, and it just was in the face for me, and that's how it panned out for me. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Nandita. That was really difficult. So for what I have to share, I'll put out a trigger warning here. Parts of it can be a bit difficult to hear as well. So if anybody wants to pop off, viewers, please feel free to. So when the pandemic struck, that's when I realized that my life so far has not been normal, because the kind of life I have been living as a result of so many social and cultural factors was exactly like the life people lived during the lockdown. And for me, there was no change at all. And when people around me started saying that, oh, not being able to go out, not being able to meet people, not being able to free to just step out and travel and take your own decisions. And that's when I realized that, okay, there's something wrong, there's something not okay about this. And I started thinking more on that. When people would ask me, okay, how has pandemic changed things for you, or what are you looking for when the pandemic ends? Those questions started to trigger me, because I started to feel that, well, I have lived my entire life in a sort of pandemic. And when the I work in a public sector bank, and there's a lot of intense public dealing and customer dealing there. And there's a lot of cultural influx that comes with people who come from various social strata. And that was a harassing experience in itself, because after coming out, you know that the world is not ready for you, and you still brave yourself to go in there. And then you face all sorts of questions as to, now that the pandemic is here, you and your family finally have time to get you married, or move ahead in life, as in settle down with a guy, or things like that. So it started unraveling for me pretty fast, all at once, and I spiraled really, really deep. So I had massive panic attacks, and at one point I just wanted to ram my vehicle off a bridge. I had suicidal ideation, and I thought that even if the pandemic ends, I could see no hope. Because for me, it felt like life has been like this, and it's going to be like that. So finding that sliver of hope in itself was very, very difficult. I also came to realization that, well, before coming out, whatever exposure to the queer community I had was through mainstream media and internet. And there, it's a very extremist experience you have. Either you see a lot of oppression, harassment going on, or you see a romanticized picture of it all. You see massive rainbow flags flying high in the sun, two very attractive cisgender gay persons kissing on camera, and having the audacity to challenge all social norms and being treated as heroes. You realize that none of that is the whole truth. There is a lot undergoing beneath the surface there. Coming to realization with all of that, and being in the confines of a home, having to go out, because public sector banks have been on essential duty. We have not had the luxury, or I mean, for us from the outside, it felt like people have the luxury to stay in their homes. We realized it a bit later that that had mental health repercussions as well. But for a person who had to step out every day and meet 150 people who were equally panicked about what's going to happen to their finances, what's going to happen to their money deposits, answering them. And when you expect people to understand and stay at homes, there was this massive crowd coming out, because there was such an air of uncertainty. So to deal with all that, to worry for your life, to worry for the life of your loved ones, all of it, it takes a massive toll. And when the second wave hit, I myself was slapped badly in that. I almost died. And that's not an overstatement, because it was a very, very bad case of COVID and typhoid, and I almost had a cardiac failure because of oxygen. I was very low on oxygen. So I'm still recovering from all of that, but this entire journey has sort of opened up a few things for me, that at the end of the day, pandemic or no pandemic, things are only going to change if I'm going to stand up for myself. And as well-intentioned as my loved ones are, they too are human beings. They are acting from their places of fear and anxiety. And it's been very hard to balance their anxiety with their well-intentions and not letting it affect me. And I'm still, to be honest, unlearning a lot of things and trying to find that balance. But not taking it personally, as well as realizing that they all mean well. is the greatest learning that I've had from the pandemic. To be able to connect with queer, for example, talking with you all right now, and after this session ends, I'm going to step out of the room and enter a cishet world again, and pretend to be a cishet for the rest of the day. So now that switching is more comfortable for me until I find a more safer space and time in life. So that's how it has been for me.
I don't know. I can't even. There is not a lot you can comprehend. I mean, pandemic lockdowns in itself have been very nice, I guess, for very few people. Other than that, even a lot of cishet people, I feel, in lockdown have been, I don't know, having really bad mental health. And as queer individuals, there is this concept of space, and then how much of that space is your own becomes a very big question. And then being, I guess, confined to a space with your family for such an extended period of time in a process where you're actually trying to figure out yourself, or maybe even people like me who had just stepped out for their masters, I think being forced to go back home was in itself a very traumatic journey. I guess it was like those 5 stages of acceptance in which I was so angry with the world of why was this happening and why is this happening. Made the decision to move out last year November itself, but not others that I've known have been so lucky. Not others I have known who are queer, who have been still at home, who are still trying to not be at home, but instead try to just exist within that sphere. And I guess in itself, you have families, and then you have families of choice. And when people financially become independent, or they are sort of becoming independent on their own, especially in terms of queer individuals. And when you kind of taste that kind of freedom where you are able to not go back into a space where you find is going to be triggering, I think when it gets taken away, a lot of your system gets a shock because you're not able to deal with it. Because at a point, if you are staying away from your family, it feels there is some amount that you can control in terms of how homophobic they can be towards you, or how weird they can make you feel about your gender identity. And I guess it is a very big thing, because when I was in like the first wave, I was just a student, and um I don't even know how to comprehend the amount of pain and the amount of distress I've seen during those months, just being forced to be existing in spaces which are constantly going to be triggering. My personal thing was just a amount of resentment, although there was no active homophobia going out or active abuse going on. Just being in that space with my parents itself was a very, very difficult journey, and I had to fight tooth nail and everything I could muster up, I guess, to kind of exit that space. Because um homes are not safe spaces for everybody, and sometimes you have to make your own home as a queer person, especially. And I guess what Nandita said about owning a space and being in a space of your own with your chosen partner, of living a life which you want, is so essential, especially in a situation like a pandemic, which, I mean, it's not ending. And when would this end, and when would we be able to make choices for ourselves and not be forced by others? I guess, especially in terms of families, it's a very triggering and very difficult thing to even think about, I guess.
Yeah. I just wanted to just quickly jump in and say that what Kriti said about the performance of being a cishet for the rest of the day became easier for her. For me, I could like relate to that in some sense, and in some sense I couldn't relate to that, because for me, see, you don't come out of the closet just once in front of one person. You come out of the closet in multiple ways. In some ways you're not out of the closet. So for me, that has been a constant pressure, and it's so minute, I'll tell you that. So I have these kids in my society who are I'm very fond of. They're all teenagers. And they know that I'm gay because they're all on Instagram, and my bio on Instagram everywhere on my personal or professional account says super gay counseling psychologist. And they've seen my stories, they've seen when I go out on dates, and I want to be very forthcoming about my queer experiences because not much was out there when I was looking out for support. So in a way, it's a corrective experience for me. But that said, I have to be very, very careful about which of these teenagers comes from a household which is connected to my mother or which is connected to my landlord. And I have to hide my stories from them. It becomes the microness of it is so debilitating at some days. It's so anxiety provoking. Like, you have to very consciously choose that who you come out to and who you not. So while in some spaces my cishet performance is easier, in most of the spaces it's become difficult, because then to balance the two is also a very, very nuanced experience, especially in a pandemic. When I know, let's just say if I was in Bangalore right now doing my masters, whoever I came out to was not a problem because it wouldn't travel back home. But now when you're stuck in a space, you have to constantly keep balancing this whole thing of who you come out to and who you don't, and how do you align the two, and how do the two parties interact with each other. So yeah, that was one aspect that came up when Kriti was talking about the cishet first performance aspect. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I think I just want to thank each one of you because the experiences that you've spoken about are experiences of a lot of people who probably also don't have the space to talk about these things. And that's what I feel about, collective shared spaces, digital spaces where, for us to be able to just talk about this itself sometimes can be a privilege. But it's also a beautiful experience to be able to just talk about what you're experiencing and feeling. And Nandita, what you were talking about sharing circles, that was my personal experience as well. So through the pandemic, I was also facilitating a healing circle for about 6 months. And I realized that as much as it was a space for the people who were a part of it, it was a very, very huge, impactful space for me as well. So I did, connect and relate with what you were saying. Okay, so I want to also kind of understand as to what kind of helped you sail through these challenges, like how did you survive through all that you've been through as a queer person, as a non-binary person, through the pandemic, through the not so safe people that have been around us. What is it that helped you sail through, and what is it that maybe people who are still in such situations can learn from?
Somebody else go first this time.
All right, I'll go first. So I discovered therapy for the first time during pandemic when my mental health was badly affected. I was well informed, but that was also a sense of coming out for me that I need therapy and it's okay to be in therapy. That in itself was a journey. So that is one thing that has helped me a lot. The most important part of what has helped me is coming in touch with mental health professionals, both psychiatrists, psychologists, coming in touch with healing circles and discovering this whole world on the internet where you can connect with so many other people going through same or different experiences. Discovering all the content and shows where queer lives are not merely a subject of either sympathy or oppression, where stories do not merely revolve around coming out or they end in tragedy. That was another liberating experience that gave me hope. And I think I really dived deep into a bit of discovering my old hobbies and making them something that give me a tomorrow to look forward to. So I bought myself a telescope after years of planning around it, and connecting with the vastness of the universe made me feel incomprehensibly attached and connected to all that was going around. That also helped me connect to the spiritual side of our existence, I discovered a lot of people who were practicing different kinds of yoga or meditation, or who were into different kinds of practices. So that all gave me a sense of support in this world, which earlier seemed hostile at every end. But then I also came to this realization that these are various pockets that I have to navigate. When the question of cishet performance comes, it's a very homogeneous experience. You sort of know your way around conversations that can get violent, around people or situations that can start triggering you, and otherwise you know how to slip in and out of that. But once you have come out to yourself, you have signed up for authenticity for the rest of your life. That's a bridge. There's no turning back. Even if you're performing, deep inside, you know who you are. And once you have faced that fear in the eye, it becomes your armor. I mean, it's just incredibly empowering, as well as it exposes you to a very vulnerable side of you. So what happened there was me figuring out, being very careful who to come out to, and how to connect with the person in sense of finding support as well as hiding this aspect of me. And then apart from the experience of being queer, there was so much else going on in terms of work, in terms of general well-being, in terms of mental health, in terms of even managing therapy or accessing therapy from within homes, spaces of homes. Because, okay, for the first I'd say for the first 10 sessions, even booking a therapy session was in itself a very, very anxious experience, because I had to plan out so much. What day it's going to be, and what am I going to answer at work, and what am I going to answer at home, and how am I going to recuperate from that, because I had signed up for therapy when I was in the throes of very bad mental health. So to talk about that further unravels a lot of difficult emotions, and to again go out in the world when the world is clearly not ready for you in whatever aspect you might speak. So apart from the self-work and finding so much support around me, I think memes have helped me the most. I have discovered so many memes domestically as well as internationally, and that has made me realize that sometimes humor can be a really powerful coping mechanism. And for me, it has been at most of the times. So coming up with dank memes or dark humor, that really helps you. It also helps you see the lightness of so many things. So yeah, that has been most of it.
I think that is so inspiring, because I know that starting your journey of mental health and starting therapy is not easy. Is not easy at all. So yes, I mean, really appreciate the fact that you have started this journey, and you also spoke about other things in terms of how you have been coping through. So I think that would be a good learning for others to kind of see what they can do around it. What are your thoughts, Trupti, Nandita?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say on this, because I think people did handle the pandemic really well. I was not one of them. I am going to just put it out there, because that is my whole truth. I tried everything I could before, like I tried painting, I tried reading, I tried, but accessing mental health services even in a pandemic in itself was a very, very difficult journey. I fortunately had a campus counselor, but mental health professionals in India are so some of them are queer friendly, but not all of them are queer affirmative, and they will not understand your world. They will not be able to help you out in any sense. My counselor from campus she is really nice. She puts in effort and everything, but poor old lady, I would say, in a way, because she was faced with so much of my angst and so much of my teenagery rebellion sort of thing when I came into masters. And then eventually, even over the pandemic, she kind of tried to support me, and she tried to help me through it. But I have faced questions like, oh, is this because of your sexuality? And then how do you then open up to a person who already has said this pre-pandemic, and then now is someone who is going to obviously say it again, even when you are at home. And then she even tried intervening by talking to my mother and trying to figure out what is exactly happening. And then she realized how screwed I am in terms of how much help I can actually get, because families can be nice, families are nice, mothers are nice, your ideas of motherhood and everything are very nice, but some of, like, you cannot learn to be a parent, I guess, in a way, if you have especially not seen a good parent like yourself. And so that has been the history of my family, and I feel that has what has really, my mother is a very sweet person, but um for the love of God, she can't be a good mother, whatever a good mother is in that sense. And I guess that is what defined the pandemic for me, trying to understand her quirks, trying to understand, um, because also I come from a family where we have faced partition, kind of intergenerational effect of that partition, then dealing with trauma, loss, all of those things. And I guess pandemic for me meant trying to find resources. Also, I tried going to a psychiatrist again, and as much as I support people who take medication for their mental health, I personally would not go through that hell myself again, because very few people will. I mean, I was put on a cocktail of medicines, which ultimately, sorry, trigger warning, which ultimately gave me an eating disorder. And coming out of that whole medicalized kind of hell was a very difficult journey, especially since I'm very anti um, pills, I guess, in case of medicines. Personally, since I am coming from a background where I have learned about mental health and the kind of scenario that healthcare has in this country, and having seen myself how sort of medicines and healthcare kind of access is available for people. So during the pandemic, was pretty much trying to balance out between my campus counselor and between my psychiatrist, and then realizing that he's really not helping me and just kind of giving me medicines to keep me sane for a period of time, I would say. And then just kind of balancing that out. And then help was also in terms of friends. It's different going back home and then having your friends stay away in their home for a certain period of time, because that's long distance. But then it also becomes very different in terms of not having that choice anymore of seeing them. So the isolation of everything, in that sense, I would say the isolation of knowing that there are people, knowing that these are people that you want to meet but cannot meet, in itself is a very, very difficult journey. And what helped me survive the pandemic was honestly, I guess, my own resilience to pull myself through that. Okay, we have been through hell before, and this is just another phase of it, so we can definitely just go out of it, I will. So yeah, that is how it sounds very morbid, but then it is what it is.
The pandemic was morbid, so how can our coping not be morbid? I would like to divide my ways of coping in three sense. So I've been connecting with my past, with my future, and also being able to attend my present. The way I've been connecting with my future as a queer person is I've been dreaming a lot. Dreaming in the sense fantasizing, actively fantasizing, like I said, about that 2 BHK, about how will I host people when they come over. Like I'll have all these tubs with hot salt water. You put your feet in, I'll give you a beer, chill the fuck out. I've been dreaming about that because I feel like it's very important for me to know that there's hope out there, that there's better something out there. So I've been actively trying to fantasize in that sense and see how that plays out for me. And I think that also, so fantasy was a very unhealthy coping mechanism for me because I used it to survive relationships where the reality of them was very not very pleasant. So I would try to fantasize about it so much so that the fantasy became stronger and more comfortable than the reality of that experience. So I'm sort of also reclaiming that sort of energy for myself, that fantasy doesn't also necessarily have to be a bad thing, but when done in moderation and with the right, like with a healthy intent, I don't know what the right intent is, it really can save you on the most bleakest of days, just to know that, you know, there is this dream that you have and someday it might come true. So just walking towards that really helps. I've been connecting with my past a lot, thinking about my queer and trans ancestors. No, I've never met one. The oldest queer person I've met is probably 40 years old. And that was so fucking relieving to know that somebody could survive with their queerness till 40 and lead a certain kind of life. Of course, that person had their own fair share of privileges, and so do I as a Savarna person. But just to see a prototype out there really helps. So I've been thinking a lot about my queer ancestors, not necessarily reading up online all the time, but just trying to connect with the sense that today, if I'm able to have this panel discussion, it's because some queer or trans person before us did step out of the house and take a step that led us to us being here. So I've been trying to channelize that sort of energy, that sort of mindset for my own self, because I feel no matter what you do, I mean, the current global political climate is extremely fascist, extremely problematic, and queerphobic. And at the same time, it can generate a sense of helplessness that how do what I do counts in. And I really believe, in some senses, not in every, that there's a sense of a ripple effect. Like today, if I'm having this panel discussion, or today, if I'm able to tell my client that I'm a lesbian, it will just somewhere make the ability of another queer or trans person to hold their pain a little easier. It could be, for instance, one of my Uber driver very recently was somebody who was trans, and who thought that that could happen. And that was like, I think it's just, I believe that one can touch life in many capacities and not just in the ways of a parent, especially when I don't want to have children. So that's how I've been connecting with my past. And with my present, I understand that there's a lot of activist aspect to our queer lives, that, you know, we would like to be politically correct because it's the political structures that, you know, have really hurted us, and we don't want to re-inflict that hurt, especially on our own community. That said, for me, it comes with a very fine balance of living my life, because I see a lot of queer people, especially, I mean, I want to talk about them. Let me talk about myself. That there's a lot of fear to be politically correct all the time, in a space where I forget how to live my life. And it almost feels like I'm performing for the cishet audience. So I have to be politically correct about what this label in the queer community means, or why some trans people are not comfortable with using the word cis anymore. Or let's just say this whole crap about what Veer Das did about what was transphobic, the pronouns stuff that happened. As much as I want to engage with these conversations, and I do, at the same time, I'm also very mindful about that rage is a very important part of me. It keeps me safe, it keeps me protected, it knows where I've been transgressed. At the same time, I also want to make space for living my queer life. Because sometimes just looking at somebody live their life in a very meaningful, authentic way can be one of the best remedies to, you know, cure queer phobia. Just looking at how this person is living a, questioning the norms, and, you know, living a sort of life that they always want to. So I've been trying to tell myself that it's okay. You get to be having that side that wants to be politically correct. That's, you're human at the end of the day, and you're going to be incorrect sometimes. But the thing is, you come back, you do the learning, because that's what cishet people don't do. They don't do it, and I don't have to put myself through the same shit. I am learning, I am growing, and that's a very big part of my queerness, that I'm questioning things. So even before coming to the panel discussion, I was so scared. I'm like, am I going to say the right thing? What if I say something that's politically incorrect? I'm like, it's okay. I'm going to go back home, I'm going to learn about it, and I don't have to know about all the identities. Still, I can respect them, I can understand them. So I think that's something that I've been trying to constantly nurture in myself, and the way I live my present today. That in the carrying the burden of educating the cishet population, I don't want to stop living my life as a queer person. Yeah, so that's quite it as to how I've been.
Completely relate to it. I learned it the hard way. I realized, of course, that I think when you're trying to, when you're a queer person, also trying to do some amount of activism, also being a mental health professional, you realize that there are too many hats you're wearing at the same time. And that for me, I think, like I said, I learned it the hard way was when mental health issues, burnout, all of those things started coming along with it. So I think it's so important to also remind yourself that yes, these things are important and they're always going to go on, but can you just pause for a moment and focus on how you're feeling right now? Like, can you pause and just think about how you're doing right now? And I didn't do that for a very long time, and it wasn't easy, of course, but yes, I think those are some really important points. And as our discussion is about, let's say, beyond binaries and beyond stigma, my last question to each one of you would be that how can we co-create safe spaces during these challenging times? And what thoughts do you have around that?
So we all address this question with a deep acknowledgement and understanding of the problematic political environment that we are living in. There's going to be a bigger top-to-down approach and a bottom-up approach. There's so much work to be done. Things have to happen on a lot of fronts in micro and macro ways. But despite all that, somehow I have firm belief in the democratic institutions of this country, because I was a sociology student once, and I read the concept of anomie. That is, when any big social change comes in, there is a period of chaos that comes before that. So because the chaos is here, it's a sign that things are beginning to rattle out. We are washing the dishes that have had garbage and scum stuck to them for so long that for a bit, as we apply dishwash and hot water to it, a lot of scum is going to come up before we see clean utensils with us, clean dishes with us. So yes, these times are definitely challenging because there is a whole generation, in fact now a couple of generations fighting for their rights. And then there is the bigger population who's still resisting that a lot. So while safe spaces not only become important in the political spheres, they also become very important in personal spheres. We need to, I think, first also create safe spaces within ourselves. That is where it has to begin, to come back to our homes every day that we have inside of us, and to find the strength and resilience to tell that no matter how bad it seems today, it is still better than yesterday when there was absolutely no conversation about it. And it is leading to a better tomorrow, because only when we go through this will we be able to bifurcate what does not work for us anymore, what is anachronistic, what is obsolete. And although we have internet and exposure to so many new and inspiring ideas, that it develops a sense of regret and restlessness in us when we see other states stepping up and taking these momentous steps, like issuing ex post facto apology to their citizens, clearing all criminal records of people previously convicted of acts under, for example, how we have under Section 377, all of those things. And when we see where our country is headed and the resistance we face on each step, it can become quite depressing at times. But then we also must remember that if you see proportionally the growth we have had as a young democracy within 7.5 decades, that should again give us hope. Because our reference points are, for example, USA. That was an independent country in 1776. We were born anew just 75 years ago. So we are challenging generations and centuries of chaos. And that is I think we should credit and congratulate ourselves before anything else, that we are still here, we are queer, and we are getting people used to us. And after that, I think there are a lot of things, because we have, for example, the Madras High Court directives. We have Parmesh Sahni's book called Queeristan. We have so many we have IWEI, Indian Workplace Equality Index. We have people, young activists, lawyers, and all these spaces coming up with a roadmap as to how to go forward. We have so many educated, and I think the most important thing that makes me happy about our current situation is that we, the young people, are 65% of the entire population. There is a reason we are called the demographic dividend. We are a massive chunk of the population. So, and the way we have been challenging our biases, we have been realizing our privileges, we have been learning to pass the mic, we are learning not to take up space, we are learning not to make this a point of clout, and all of that. I think as hard as it seems right now to challenge the previous generations, I am so certain that we are going to leave a better tomorrow for the generations to come in. So with that knowledge, when we walk into our workspaces, when we walk into our homes, when we talk to friends and people, there is always an awareness that somebody might be looking for a hope, for an aspiration, for an admiration that, you know, I've been wanting to come out for so long, and there is this person who exists, like Nandita, they said how they made it so easy for their Uber driver. So making safe spaces is not merely reading up and being politically correct. I think it starts to reflect in your personality. You exude a warmth, you exude an acceptance, and that translates to so many areas of politics and civics and finance, everything around you. Because then you're not only, when you accept people with their diverse gender and sexual identities, you automatically bring intersectionality to the core of your activism. You accept people with their privileges, you accept people without their privileges. So I think the most important factor in creating or co-creating a safe space is to create a space where you accept yourself, where you accept others, and you offer a space where there is room for all, where there is room for disagreement, where there is room for learning, and where there's room for growth.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for sharing that. I think you made some really important points and spoke about various different aspects as to how we can look at creating safe spaces or co-creating safe spaces. So I think those are some really important things there. Nandita and Trupti, if y'all would have anything y'all would like to add.
So for me, that question comes with a very, like, I could see my stomach sink, because when you talk about co-creating safe spaces, for me, it sounds like a very big term. Like, there has to be some organization or there has to be some support group. And I am tired. As a queer person, I am tired. It takes a lot of energy to create these spaces. So when I am in a position where I am tired, the only way out is to seek help. And that's what exactly I've been doing, in the sense that when Kriti said that, put yourself out there and you might connect with a fellow queer person. So seeking help has been a very important part for me. It did not start with the intent to create a safe space, but it ended up becoming one. So I'll give you one example. So I've been trying to identify my fears as a queer person. My fear of, let's just say, the dating pool that I was talking about. The dating pool is really small and I will never find somebody. So I've been actively trying to put myself on Hinge. And there are times when I uninstall the app. That said, I think I take those times as my resting phase now. I don't see it as that I've given up. It's just that I'm tired of engaging with people, because my profession also calls for something like that, for me to be able to engage and be vulnerable and be able to hold space. And not that the two are completely same, but they're also not completely different. That said, so I've been trying to put myself out there and tell you, okay, that's a fear, let's go check it out. And in the process, I've stayed on that app for 6 months now, and I want to boast about it, because I've had some 70, 80 matches. It feels good to be able to connect with 70 to 80, queer people. And fuck yes, I'm going to boast about it, because back in the day, I don't know how much of an access I had, to it. And I think that sort of helped me create a safe space, because a lot of these people I've gone on dates with. Again, another fear, not being able to meet somebody concrete or consequential enough to go out on a date with. Okay. I have exposed myself to, by this time, 15 or 16 dates. And that is a lot of work for me, because engaging with people drains me of my energy. It sometimes provides me, but mostly takes away my energy. I think I am an introvert in some sense these days. So I've been trying to look at that fear and work through that. And in the process, I have found some really, really warm, healthy connections. I have found queer people to send me gay memes, to send me like the most gay videos ever on YouTube, and that has sort of created a safe space for me. So I think one way in which we can create a co-space for ourselves is by asking for help. Because if for me, if I were to imagine it, it feels like you know how people in the earlier days would communicate by burning a fire, and the smoke would rise, and somebody else on the other side would get to know that okay, something's going on here. So I think collectively we are burning a lot of fires. It means that we need to come together and just be there for each other, because I think as much as there's a relief in knowing that somebody knows better, there's also relief in knowing that this person knows only as much as I do. And I think there's also a sense of solidarity in that I am not alone in this sinking ship. There's somebody like me. So I think for me, it all comes down to, at this point in my life, and a very, very draining pandemic, is just seeking help and learning to ask for it. Yeah, also come to therapy.
Okay, all right. Trupti, do you want to add anything?
I don't know actually how to go about it or how to think of it, because like I said, I have found community spaces to be very limited to an urban space, a very kind of privileged space. So my thinking, my thought process is kind of trying to figure out if we can move beyond cities, if we can move beyond places of privilege wherein these things are obviously accessible and we need them. We need more sharing circles, we need more healing circles, we need more discussions and everything. But on the other end of the spectrum also, I don't know, I'm just thinking but how to expand this kind of reach to not like tier 3 cities, or maybe smaller towns, or maybe places where is not, it's not going to reach that easily, because even in urban spaces it is very concentrated among a certain population who speaks in a certain way, who is existing in a certain way. But then I guess it comes from a thought process, because my last flatmate's house help, her daughter was questioning her identity and her sexuality. And when you're staying in a slum, how do you then imagine a safe space? Like, space ही नहीं है, there is no space. Where do you create a space? Like, where do you go and talk? Even like in the pandemic, there was a big question in terms of staying at home and accessing therapy. So how will you talk to someone? How will you talk to your therapist knowing that very well your parents or someone will overhear you at one point of time? So my idea is just, I'm not very concrete about it, but maybe working on something that might involve a physical space, if this pandemic ever goes away in this lifetime, and involving people who do not have the language, because language is obviously a very powerful tool. It is also, it can also be a tool of oppression in a way, or that we as privileged queer people have in that terms. So maybe that's sort of a space where you don't have to be limited to the kind of discussions we have in so-called elite queer circles, I feel, in a way. But then expanding beyond that, because gender identity and sexuality, I guess, cannot be defined. I mean, what would you try to define as maybe a lesbian as in Marathi? Then trying to kind of seek out those things and trying to figure out, maybe, yeah, that's my idea of a safe space, expanding the dictionary which of we have in terms of gender, sexuality, and spaces, and how do we kind of bring forward people who are not limited to maybe a 500 cover charge party person. Yeah.
I just wanted to add something quickly or what Trupti said about giving people, not giving, encouraging them to form a vocabulary, because I think you can't give that to somebody. It has to come through its own. You can obviously do the support work there. Because I did my thesis on, my master's thesis on the lived experiences of people on the ACE spectrum in India, because there's barely any work on that. Like there's just one paper you will find, and that too it's a case study. It's not a qualitative or a quantitative research. So at that point of time, through the focus group interviews, I realized that a lot of participants had this similar experience of first coming across the term asexual in their class 9th biology CBSE book, which is a chapter most of the teachers rushed through. That said, they found it very affirming to know that there is a thing in the plant world where there are some asexual species, and they could relate to that. Even though it's a plant, it was extremely affirming for them to know that this is a thing on this planet Earth where not everybody likes to engage in sexual activities or has a sexual attraction. So I think coming up with the vocabulary is extremely important at this point of time. And I mean, that's exactly, I think, why I related to what Trupti said about, because language is the first thing that you use to communicate your identity, not even to anybody else, to your own self. Like, they said कि lesbian को मराठी में क्या बोलते हैं, तो जब तक that word will not come, it doesn't feel that real. You might be able to like give all the traits of a lesbian. That said, if there's not a box to hold it, that can feel very incomplete as a process. So I think, yeah, that's a very fair point that they raised here. Just wanted to say that.
Right. I think I completely agree with all of you here. And I think that's also a hard-hitting reminder that a lot of us come from privileged spaces, and we need to understand that this is not all what queer or non-binary even is. There's so much more, and language for sure does play a huge role. And I think while we are talking about safe spaces, for me, when I have to think about it, I feel like this is a lovely safe space for me, at least as a person, where we are talking about different things about identity, about mental health. And for me as a person, Kashish has also really always been a safe space. Of course, this is the pandemic right now and the entire format has changed, but I think so many of us would always look forward to attending Kashish physically on a year-to-year basis and just meet people. So I think that was one lovely, safe space. Right now it is through this panel discussion that we're having. And I'd also like to talk about, the platform that I lead right now. So I lead a platform called AtEase, which is an inclusive mental health platform by Lilac Insights. What we aim to do is we aim to unfilter mental health, specifically catering to cis women, trans women, and non-binary individuals. We offer individual, couples, and family therapy. The approach that we would use is, we try to use an intersectional lens, social justice lens, and queer affirmative lens. So if there's anybody who, is looking out for mental health support, if you know anyone who is in need of a therapist, feel free to reach out to us. You can find us at Mental Health AtEase on various social media platforms. And yes, I think in our own ways, if we can look at creating safe spaces, however we can, whatever we can do, I think that's about it.
So thanks a lot, Richa, for your wonderful hosting and your very kind of calibrated questions. Really brought out so many different aspects of all the participants. And I really, really thank each one of you for sharing your thoughts so candidly. I know it's a bit hurtful, what you've all gone through, but I would say sharing definitely, hopefully will bring about healing, not just for you people, but also for the people who are going to be tuning and listening to this panel discussion. And thank you. I can't even have any words to thank the sharing you people have done. And I'm sure it'll benefit a lot of people who are looking for answers and also mirroring their own experiences. As Nandita has been speaking, your experiences will kind of encourage other people to basically find solutions to their own issues per se. So thank you for sharing this thought so candidly. And thank you AtEase for collaborating with Kashish and bringing about this panel discussion. And so there's still one more week of Kashish still pending. And if you have not got your passes yet, please go to mumbaiquefest.com and buy your passes. And if you have any questions for Nandita, Kriti, Trupti, or RICHA, please put it in the comment box and I'll make sure that they see these questions and respond to you right here on YouTube or Facebook. So thanks once again, and hope you all enjoy a lot of Kashish. We have lots of LGBTQ films. And also this year we have 90 female filmmakers and 10 non-binary filmmakers. And we have a huge, also a lot of LGBT focused films. So let's hope we all enjoy the films and take back some kind of an idea about who we are, what we are, and where to go ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us here today, Kashish and AtEase. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation.